my name is Cassidy and you're watching That Spooky Lifestyle. We're moving the ooky, the spooky, the creepy and the crawly into our everyday lives. Today we are going to be talking about some mythology and folklore around mermaids in a bunch of different cultures. So I am super excited. Folklore and like cryptids are like my favorite thing to talk about. Love listening to podcasts about them, love watching shows about them, love making videos about them. So here we are. A couple of quick disclaimers before we get into this video. One, I swear a lot. I'm sorry. It is what it is. I'm trying to be better at it. Not doing it, not better at it. Two, I am Canadian. I only speak English. I'm gonna do my best with pronouncing things right, but you know my best doesn't always mean good. Like, it just means my best. Three, if I get any information wrong, definitely let me know down below. Or if you guys have any mermaid folklore tales, stories, definitely let me know. I try to research these topics as much as I can, but I produce one video a week, along with having a full-time job and, you know, friends, family, all that good stuff. So I research it as much as I can, but as you know, that doesn't always mean you get the facts right. So, and I do want to learn, so if you guys are like, no, that is not what happened or how that was, definitely let me know. Let's get right into it. I'm excited. Okay, I'm excited. So I always start these videos off with talking about what I already know about the subject. So mermaids, half fish or serpent and half human. Normally the upper part of the body is half human and the bottom half is like fish, tail, or snake kind of thing going on. It does make me think of that one Family Guy episode though, where like his top half was the fish and his bottom half was human, and he's like, what? You can't reproduce with someone who's got a fish for a bottom half. And Lois is like, yeah, I'm still good. Like, I don't wanna. But I mean, he does bring up a good point, because mermaids are supposed to be like super sexy and seductive and like, you know, kind of siren-y. But it's at the same time, it's like, what would you do with a mermaid if you like, you know, do you know what I'm saying? There's just like, there's just things that I feel like people haven't thought all the way through, but we're not gonna get into that. Mermaids, sexy, seductive. They make me think of sirens too. Like, they're kind of the same thing, where like they just lure you in with how like good their voices are, and their singing is supposed to be amazing. They're supposed to be super sexy. And then they usually end up killing you, so you can have too much of a good thing, you know? But yeah, so that's all I already know. Now let's get into the delish stuff that we learned. There aren't only legends about mermaids, there are also legends about mermen. You can also call them merfolk, merpeople. There's also the word sirens, you know, if you're feeling spicy. And then there are also harpies. Now harpies are slightly different than mermaids, but depending on what story you're reading, they can kind of mesh together, have very similar characteristics in some stories. So yeah, there's also like water nymphs and nymphs just in general. So there are very many terms to describe a creature that is kind of the same thing. It's just like this sexy, half human, half fish thing. But as we're gonna find out, not all of them are actually sexy. Some of them are super terrifying. Legends of mermaids are definitely not anything new. They can be found all the way back to ancient mythology, actually. The first kind of like documented mermaid tale is that of the Syrian tale of Atargatis. I think I'm pronouncing that right. No, actually I don't think I'm pronouncing that right, but I'm not looking it up because we got a lot of names we got to get through in this video. So Atargatis was a divine goddess who fell in love with this human shepherd, and unfortunately, like, I didn't read the whole story, but I read like the skim of it, and it's like her divine strength ended up killing him. Like, what you gonna do? This of course made her feel really guilty, and she was just like, oh fuck. And you know, like, you know when you're just like, you didn't mean to do that and you did it and now he's dead. It was very much like that, and so she felt so guilty and so sad about it that she was going to end her life in the ocean. So normally when a god or goddess jumps into the ocean, they turn into a fish, but in this tale, because Atargatis was so beautiful, she was like, you know, Aphrodite-like just, yes, bitch, you know, she was that bitch. The ocean was like, nay, we're only gonna turn part of you into a fish, because the upper half, like, She actually became the first mermaid. Her bottom half turned into a fish, and her upper half stayed this, you know, beautiful, seductive, seduced. What am I trying to say? She turned into this mermaid. Okay, upper half very beautiful, bottom half fish. Moving right along into Greek mythology, there are lots of terms, people, gods that are very closely related to mermaids. Even the god Triton, which is Poseidon's son, he's often viewed as like a half man, half fish sort of creature. Then even in stories like the Odyssey, there are a bunch of sirens in that try to lure Odysseus to his death. Which in those stories, you know, there was a lot of death in them, to be fair. And then also just over the years, human culture and population, like the fishermen would, you know, see weird shit that they couldn't explain in the ocean, and they'd be like, oh, the fuck, and then they would swap stories, and so that's also kind of helped mermaid lore and like even just sea creature lore grow and expand and then travel to a bunch of different cultures, and yeah, here we are today. Leaving mythology for a minute, Christopher Columbus, on his journey over the seas, actually reported a sighting of a mermaid, but it was in fact not a mermaid. It was the first sighting of a manatee. And I'm gonna be honest, I think what this really tells us is that like Christopher Columbus needs to get his eyes checked, because this creature is clearly not a mermaid. If anything, I would have called this a mer-dog. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it looks to me like a half dog, half fish thing, and like you can't tell me that snout doesn't need to be booped. You can't tell me. I won't listen. You can't convince me it needs to be booped. Our first stop on this mythological journey is Japan, where they have two actually totally different but totally interesting mermaid folklore. So the first mermaid tale we're going to talk about today originates from Japan. Now looking at how it's spelt, my dumbass was gonna be like Ningayo. Like that's, looking at it, that's what I would have guessed. However, yet again, I've been proven wrong.
Ningyojoruri.
I think we can all agree I'm not going to pronounce that right, so I'm just gonna call it the human fish, because that is the rough translation that I found. So, this human fish is supposed to have like the head of a person with like kind of the mouth or snout of a monkey. Kind of looks very ape-like in that way, which it might be a whole head and mouth of an ape, but like, you know, humans, apes, they kind of look similar in some sense, so I get where that's going. And then it's supposed to have like tiny little sharp teeth, which kind of makes me think of a piranha. Do you know how piranhas kind of have like that ape? It's not really an ape, but you know, they got that like, yeah, that. So yeah, it's got like this kind of ape face going on, tiny little biting teeth, and then the rest of it is like this fish kind of looking body. According to its folklore though, apparently its skin is supposed to taste quite good, and when you eat the skin of one of these creatures, you become immortal. But not all the tales are as positive as that. It's also supposed to represent bad luck if you catch it. So for any fishermen who caught this human fish creature, it's supposed to bring bad luck. It can be like a symbol of like a really bad storm to come. So a lot of fishermen who ever caught them would throw them back. And then also, if one of these creatures would wash up on like the shores of a beach, this was supposed to be a bad omen, and it usually meant that war was gonna come soon. So one of the most popular stories about this creature is, and I'm gonna pronounce it wrong, but honestly, again, we got a lot of stories to get through. Can't look up every name pronouncing that we're gonna do today. Yaobakuni? I know I said that wrong, and you know I said that wrong. I'm glad we're on the same page. So a fisherman caught one of these creatures and was like, ooh, but he, instead of throwing it back, took it to his house because he was gonna have some guests over that night, and he's like, you know what, let's just chop it up, serve it to the guests, it'll be fine. While this house party is kind of going on, one of the guests peeks into the kitchen and sees this grotesque, like, monkey-faced looking thing, and they secretly, like, whisper it to all the other guests, like, holy shit, don't eat this thing, like, ugh. So what the guests end up doing is taking all these little, like, bits and pieces, and they, like, fold it in a napkin and put it in their, like, pocket or whatever, like, as they were pretending to eat, right? And obviously at this party there was some alcoholic beverages going on. So unfortunately one guest drank a bit too much, and so they went home with all these like fish meat in their pocket. And what ended up happening is his daughter accidentally ate one of the little pieces of fish when they got home. So nothing bad happened. They were just like, oh, okay, I guess it wasn't cursed, or this isn't a bad thing, like, whatever. But after a while, you know, the little girl started growing up, getting bigger, getting taller, and then all of a sudden she just stopped aging. And so through the story it said that she had a bunch of different lovers, and you know, because she would just get old, she would stay the same and they would get old and die, so she had a bunch of different suitors throughout her life. And then at one point she was honestly like, look you guys, like, I'm done, like, I've been here long enough, I'm done. And she ended her life at 800 years old. Moving on to the second mermaid creature that I found in Japan. This one, Nureonna. So it is a part snake, part human. So their head is human, they got the hair of a woman, face of a woman, snake of a tongue, and tongue of a snake, and then their body is very serpenty, snake-like. So this creature is like terrifying. What these creatures do is they sit by the shores, and so obviously their upper half looks like a human, and they cradle this like kind of basket. So to someone far away, or to someone, you know, who's just not really paying attention, it looks like it's a woman in the water like holding a baby, and obviously they look distressed, and so any passerby would want to help them. Which, like, that whole idea is just terrifying. Like, I hate that. What? So it said that if someone tries to pick up this bundle or help them, basically the bundle is so heavy that it pins people to the rocks, and then these creatures can slowly drain the blood out of you, and that's how they eat. In other stories, their hair is so long that it'll wrap around you and strangle you. So all of these, honestly, not like stranger danger. Do not go helping these creatures. So we are going to leave Japan now and head on over to Iceland, where they have some merman folklore that we are going to talk about. I'm not even joking. I typed in how to pronounce Marbendlar, because that's the Icelandic creature we're going to talk about, and the first thing that came up was how to pronounce IKEA. I must be missing something, because it's like, oh no, are these, okay, so these mermen are called Marbendlar, and I know I'm not pronouncing that right, but like, I just looked for it and IKEA came up, so I didn't do it, Google's doing that, unfortunate. However, I also read some stories about creatures called finfolk, and both of these seem quite the same, so I don't know if maybe like one like name is more popular to call these creatures than the other. Like, I'm not really sure. Okay, so apparently these creatures were shapeshifters. They could be men, they could be creatures, depending on what story you're looking at. And it said that they're supposed to transform so fast. It's like when light shines off of water and you get that kind of like quick reflection, like that's supposed to be them like changing into something else. So it's kind of like a mirage, or like that little glint of light that you see, that's supposed to be them like shifting or changing. Like, they're so fast, that's how fast it is. Okay, so in some stories they're supposed to be super handsome, strapping young men with, you know, the bottom half of a fish. And then in other stories they're like these hideous beast creature things. So like, it really depends, you know, maybe what mood they're in, depending on what they want to look like. These creatures are also like, I don't know if they're really known as it, but I think they're referred to, wow, English, I'm so good at it. They're also referred to as like river horse kind of creatures, because when they're riding the waves, it can kind of look like their top half is a human and the bottom half is like a horse. Like, it's supposed to look kind of like powerful like that, right? I've also seen images where their top half is human, their bottom half is like that mermaid kind of looking tail fin thing, but then they have these two legs also like attached to their fin, which I could see then if they were riding waves, like it would kind of look very like centaur, like half horse, half human, or like half beast, half human sort of thing. I could see that. It is also said that these mermen appear when they are as humans as fully dressed in, you know, rivers, waters, oceans. Usually they're playing some sort of musical instrument. So they are quite powerful, and they do have magic powers to control like the water and things like that, like, of course. And they can be used for good or evil. So they can either like lure fishermen or unsuspecting victims to their death with their music or their voices, much like a siren. And then they can also be quite helpful. There are stories where like they turn into a loon and they kind of warn fishermen of certain areas so that their boat doesn't sink and stuff like that. So they can be good or bad, just depending. So there is a popular tale about a fisherman that's out at sea, and while he's out there, this huge storm ends up coming in and he can't actually get back to shore. Like the waves keep pushing him away and he just can't get back. And so he's actually like shivering, he's cold, he's freezing, he's like worried he's gonna drown out there. And then he looks up and he sees this man riding a wave in the water. And so he knows that it's one of these, you know, mermen, and he starts praying to him. And this merman comes up to him and is like, oh yeah, it's really cold out here. The merman is like, I'm so cold I lost my sock. And so what this fisherman does is he like rips off his booty, rips off a sock, and he gives it to the guy, the mermaid in the water, like, not sure why you need this, but here you go. And then the merman actually helps him and kind of like calms the storm enough that he can get to shore. And so it's kind of one of those tales where you're like, oh, see, they can be nice. Now we are flying off to Ireland, where they have mermaids that are actually called Selkies. And basically what these creatures are is when they're in the water, they're like seals. They look like seals. They're seals having a good time, and then when they come ashore they take their skin off, they hide their skin, and then usually they look like very, you know, beautiful women, of course. So these Selkies like store their skin in like hidden places. They don't just leave it out anywhere. They hide it in rocks and like they tuck it away in caves. They hide it because they don't want people to find it. Because what human men like to do is they like to go out and find a Selkie skin, and then the man hides it somewhere the Selkie can't find it. Because if you hide a Selkie skin, you can marry them and they'll stay human, and you can obviously raise a family with them, etc. But these stories always end up in a tragedy for the man and their family, because a Selkie always looks for their skin. Like it could be 20 years and they will constantly look for their skin. And as you can imagine, humans were not real great at like keeping, you know, up with stuff for like 20 years. That's a bit much. So, you know, usually by that time the man gets lazy or doesn't move it as often, or the Selkie just finds it, their skin, and then they turn back into a seal and they leave forever. They never come back, they don't see their children, they don't see the man, you know, they're out. They're like, yeah, I've been trapped here forever, and F you, F you, F you. I'm going back to my Selkie, living my best life. Some Irish families though do believe that their ancestry came from mermaids or Selkies, and they do have mermaids like on the crest of their family. And then I also read that Ireland does have mermen, but like these guys were supposed to be like fugly. Like fugly with a capital F. Yeah, and no one was stealing their skin trying to marry them, so. Now we are gonna hop on over to Scotland and talk about some Scottish mermaids. So Scotland has this man-like creature, or merman, that they're called the Blue Men of Minch. And these creatures are called that because they're always seen in groups. Now, basically what it is these creatures would hang out just their torsos above water, and their upper half looks human. And whenever fishermen or sailors come by, they would wave at them in like a friendly manner. And so the fishermen would think that it's just regular humans that are like drowning or, you know, having trouble swimming or need help, and so they'd go over to help them. But the closer they got, they'd start to notice like, oh man, these guys look kind of weird, like these are like, what is this? And then the closer they got, they realized that their skin has this like sickly, like bluish tint to it. And unfortunately in the stories, once you're close enough to see that, obviously all the blue men jump up, grab you, pull you in the water, and they eat you. So now we are gonna head on over to Russia, and we are gonna talk about Rusalki or Rusalka, depending. So Rusalki are the spirit of women who took their own lives or who drowned themselves because they were pregnant and it was a baby that they didn't want, or just the situation they were in, didn't want to be pregnant. So they're not really the jolliest kind of spirit you could meet. So these women, their spirit lives on in basically a vengeful mermaid creature. So these mermaids tend to punish men and children, not really other women, but men and children, because they kind of blame them for the fate that they had. And these creatures are supposed to be very beautiful, very alluring, and they do lure you in with singing, much like sirens and mermaids that I've heard of in the past. Once they lure you in, there's two different versions. Sometimes they'll drag you to the bottom of the ocean and drown you, and in other versions, they tickle you until you die. So I like how there's absolutely no similarity between those two deaths. Now we arrive at our final destination, which is France. So in France, they have a creature called a Melusine, and this creature, okay, so her mom is part fairy, or is fairy, and her dad is human. They got together, had a baby. Now, she's supposed to be very beautiful, very gorgeous. Apparently, her father betrays her mother. So when this Melusine hears of this betrayal, she locks her father away, I think in a mountain. Yeah, in a mountain. And when her fairy mother hears about this, her mother is furious and is like, why would you do that? And so the fairy mother curses the child, and in this curse, she turns into this serpent kind of dragon thing every Saturday. Which made me laugh, because you know when people are like, oh, Saturdays for the boys, or like Saturdays are for the girls. It's like, no, Saturdays are for the serpents. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, every Saturday she turns to a serpent below the waist. And in some stories she does have wings, depending. So this Melusine falls in love with a human man. Sometimes it's a king, sometimes it's not. And she tells him, you can never look upon me in the bath. Now, I'm not sure if like when she's in water, she turns into a serpent as well, or maybe she just bathes on Saturdays. I'm not sure. I didn't look that far into it. But she says, listen, you can never look at me in the bath. Okay? And the man is like, yeah, sure, no problem. That's not a big deal. You know it's a big deal. So these peeping Tom perverts always end up looking at her in the bath, and they see that she's this like weird serpent thing between like waist down, and they're like, whoa. She sees this, she freaks out, and she flies away, never to be with them again. So those are all my mermaid folklore mythology stories that I have for you guys today. Definitely let me know down below if you guys have any mermaid tales, or if I got any information wrong, because I'd love to hear that. Definitely subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. You will lose me in the social media void. There's so many content creators out there now. Definitely follow me on Instagram. I'm super active on there. I post there all the time. I post shorter videos on fun topics there all the time as well. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me, and I will see you in my next video.